again. Now, someone asked me about the manure on the eggs. And I said, I like the manure on the eggs. You know why I like the manure on the eggs? Because I said the E. coli helps brain functions. Well, not only that, the University of Toronto and Association for the Children's Hospital, Toronto, have utilized the barotoxin produced by E. coli, so it's in all feces, to completely dissolve brain tumors in 2 to 5 days, including the vessels going to it. So eat shit and live. And I talk about in my recipe book, I talk about the people who had cancers that wouldn't reverse and started eating fecal matter, and was able to start reverse. We're talking about a little amount, medicinal, element, and it just tastes like overcooked vegetables, because that's what the cow's eating. And what they do is we'll get an Amish or a Mennonite, farmer to cut off a section of the bowel. They tie it off like a sausage, and then you just cut about an ounce or two of that off at a time every couple of days for a couple of months. And you can get tumors to reverse very quickly when they're not moving otherwise. And when I gave a lecture at Yale about 23 years ago, 18 of those doctors went on to do research of reversing tumors with bacteria and virus and parasites. 18 different studies are going on at different universities, but there is no money in it. Yale was the first one to come up with a viable product. And what they did was took salmonella, which normally eats, certain kinds of salmonella will eat cancer. It'll choke, bring oxygen to the area or choke it off, and that salmonella will then feed on the tumor. They attenuated the salmonella so it does no longer eat the tumor, will help get oxygen into the tumor and stop it from growing, but it won't eat it and get rid of it. So what they did was created a solvent that they will inject into it to dissolve. Then you have all the toxic reaction from that. The shot of salmonella is $8,000. The solvent to dissolve the tumor is $12,000. And then all of the medication you're going to have to take for the symptoms of that waste product of the solvent dissolving the tumor is another $30,000. It's all about money. Eat some chicken shit. Get your, crack some eggs. Let your eggs rot and eat salmonella. Eat this stuff. What do you think people did 100 years ago? You didn't have toilet paper. You wiped yourself with a stick. You got fecal matter on you. You went and made your food and you ate shit all the time. Was anybody dying? No, everybody was thriving. Cancer was near unheard of. Cancer was near unheard of. Now we're so clean, we're in trouble. And Dr. Joel Weinstock at Iowa University discovered we're too clean. About 20 years ago, he found that the pigs in the university were sick. And he's a gastroenterologist. So he was raised on a farm. He knew how pigs lived, and they were always healthy. And here these pigs living in this clean environment were sick as anybody could be. So he looked at the difference in the intestinal tract, because that's his specialty, and found that they had no trichinosis. They had no whipworm. All pigs and all humans used to have trichinosis. The human digestive tract is very close to identical to a pig's. So he took the trichinosis from a farm, from those animals, those pigs, and put them in the pigs at the university. They all got well. So he said, I wonder if we do this to humans. So he went to the FDA, put in an application, and they accepted that he could do it with 6 patients, but all of them had to have been treated with medical therapy for at least 10 years. Can you imagine being subjected to the medical profession only for 10 years, and then if it didn't work, you could suffer for 10 years before you get to try an alternative? That is the law. It was the law at that time. I found out it was the law at that time. So he had 6 people. One is little suffering as 10.5 years, all the way up to 32 years of suffering with inflammatory bowel syndrome. That means anything you eat, drink, you will have gas, vomit, or diarrhea, or some discomfort, indigestion, severe discomfort, no matter what you eat. He filtered out the trichinosis egg, put it in Gatorade, and gave it to them. Now see, I tried to spike myself with parasites after those tests. I tried to get parasites so many times and could never get a parasite. I wanted parasites. I wanted to get well faster, because all my body would work was this virus, because I was so poisoned with the radiation and chemotherapy. So I was putting, I was just downing them the meats or whatever they in, and even though I didn't have all the hydrochloric acid in the stomach, they never survived. I never got a parasite. So he put it in Gatorade, which is an alkalizing substance, and it neutralized any hydrochloric acid. So the eggs gestated and grew and developed, and they got the whipworm. Within 5 days, all their symptoms left except for one. 5 of the 6, all their symptoms left in a week. Can you imagine? Overnight, all of a sudden, because you've got trichinosis. Now, how many people have been told trichinosis is one of the worst diseases you could have? Yeah, I mean, they scared the hell out of us, all through, when I was able to reason what trichinosis was, oh, you're going to get trichinosis, you're going to get trichinosis. I thought for sure the rabbit would give me trichinosis. What does it do? It gets you well. Humans, primitive humans, all have trichinosis. It's a part of their intestinal system. It eats certain elements of your food and gives it delivery to you so that your whole intestines can function properly.
How can you tell you've got?
Pardon?
How can you tell you've got the proper E. coli, you've got trichinosis, or you got a parasite, other than having a test?
You can't, other than that, because of your, parasites and those things aren't destructive. They're doing their job. So usually people who have them have no idea they have them, because it's a natural part of the system. So now I worked very hard, as I said, trying to get a parasite. I finally got a parasite 3 years ago this month. I had forced it, I had taken milk that I had fermented. Now I was a real cereal eater too. So I would consume, probably, half a gallon of pasteurized 2% milk a day. And I put that with lots of cereal. And of course, when I was out of the home on my own, I eat cereal all day long. And powdered donuts, those are my favorite, with lots of that pasteurized milk. So I wanted to clean the milk out of my bone system, because I know that was part of my blood and bone cancer. So 3 years ago, I took some mocha powder, which is very much like cereal, but it's a root and ground, and I wanted to ferment it in milk to force a detoxification.
Maca?
Maca, yeah. So I fermented it for about 6 days. Talk about fermentation. This is summertime, and it was so strong when I popped it. I went like this, expecting it to be just slightly, fermented. The alcohol literally burned my sinuses for 2 days. That's how strong it was. So I did something very stupid, thinking I was Superman again, and I drank 3 cups in a day in a 24-hour period. I broke out into hives you would not believe. I mean, huge hives all over the place. So I was every hour taking cold, slices of tomato and rubbing it on them, or cold slices of cucumber, doing the vinegar and tomato baths every hour. And I had to fly to Hanoi, in a few days, so I got them to subside. When I got there, I was in them again, so I was stuck in a hotel room for 3 days, putting this, those things on until it was all gone. Then all of a sudden I realized I had a little a noodle that was swimming around like a stingray in the toilet after a bowel movement. I said, I've got a parasite. I've got a tapeworm. I've got a tapeworm. I've got a tapeworm. I've got a parasite finally. I was jumping for joy. And I didn't know what the results would be, but I was, happily anticipating. And then about 6 weeks later, my bowel movements got better and better. You have to understand that I had true constipation since I was a child that I can remember, all the antibiotics and tetanus shots. I was getting tetanus shots every 3 to 6 months. And so by the time I was probably 8 years old, I had bowel movements once every 3 to 5 days. And when it came out as hard as granite, and it ripped my rectum every time, so I bled every time that I went. Because I was autistic, I could not talk about it and explain it. So this went on until I went on to a raw food diet, and then I had bowel movements every day. However, the first one out was as hard as granite and huge. So I continued to tear. My rectum was an inch thick in scar tissue by the time I was 22 years old. Now, this continued even on a raw diet. When I got that tapeworm, the fecal matter started getting softer, the sigmoid colon area got softer, so I have not had a bowel movement that tore my rectum in 3 years since that parasite. So I was in where was I at the time? I think I was in Cambodia, and I got this craving for onion. Who sits and eats an onion like an apple? What idiot would do that? I did. I sat down and ate a half of an onion because I just craved it. And then a few hours later, I shat out 45 feet of a tapeworm. I thought, oh God, I get rid of my tapeworm. To get a tapeworm, and then I eat onion and shit the whole thing out. I was so upset. I was angry and crying and stuff like that. So, and I had to pull it out of the toilet. There was a wood floor, so I wanted to measure it. And those things shrivel. And in 2 hours, it will be shriveled from a noodle to the size of a rice. And it's just like a piece of rice. So I took it out of the toilet and I'm spreading it all over the floor and measured out. It was about 45, 48 feet. So I was all upset. But I was still okay. My bowel movements were nice. No constipation with the first movement of the day. And then a few weeks later, I noticed another little noodle swimming rice. Still there, still going. About 3 months after that, I went down and had a bowel movement, 50 feet. Came out, last I've seen it. That's it. But never been constipated since. I've had good bowel movements for 3 years, and that tapeworm did me good. So that's what I'm saying. Those things in nature, we've created a symbiotic relationship for at least 4 million years. Did you know they uncovered some more bones from where they found Lucy that are 3.8 to 9 million years old, that the Homo sapiens have been around? We've been around a long time. We've been eating fecal matter and urine and everything else, dirt, when we were carving up meat and everything. We didn't die with this, we thrived. And all the manure you hear about, we've increased the age, we're living longer. Absolute malarkey. When I was living in the graveyards, when I was traveling all over, you know how many tombstones, those old graveyards I saw where people were 102, 106 years old. People living old, sure. There were people that were died at birth and died at different ages, but there were a lot of people living old. We've had very few people living old into their hundreds, and I must have seen at least 200. And once in a while, Clinton gives somebody that's 105 years old a certificate. We have 280 million people in this country, and we have one every 5, 10 years that comes up as a centenarian. It's ludicrous. So all of that hype that you hear, we're living longer, is malarkey, and we're not living better. We're more diseased than ever. Do you know that in Omaha, Nebraska, you have more hospitals and more hospital beds per capita, and every one of them is full? This is an agricultural state with a lot of chemicals and damage and pollution. Anybody have questions up in this area first? Yes?
I've read, actually, bought some. I don't know anything about noni juice, or if it's got any benefits, or if it's a...
He asked about noni juice. Was there any benefits? Yes, when I was in Hawaii and in Japan, in East Asia, noni juice is a foul. Noni is a foul fruit. It stinks worse than durian and does not taste good as durian. This stuff is foul tasting and foul smelling, and to get you to drink it, they treat it and condition it and do all kinds of things to it. The natives, when they eat it, they do restore their health. They use it medicinally in a small amount, and it takes very little to work. And they sell you bottles and bottles of this noni juice, and it has about 12 to 18% effectuality once it's processed that way. So
Tastes like vomit.
It's,
Sure, I don't really know.
yeah, but that, you should taste the real noni.
Really.
Yes,
Two questions. First, about beans.
Beans?
I didn't hear about them. And second, about cheese. What kind of cheese are you talking about?
okay. She asked about beans, legumes. Beans in the human digestive tract are mostly poison. If you eat a raw bean, you're going to go through some intense intestinal crap, diarrhea and vomit you wouldn't believe. I tried it, I did it. I don't believe anything unless I've gone through it, and I've gone through it. So I even germinated these beans to be able to eat them. And I had diarrhea and vomit and headaches for 3 days. I thought I was going to die. It was pretty bad. And this is while I was living outdoors on a bicycle. So it was pretty traumatic. You have to cook beans for the human body. Cows, goats, all of those herbivores have a digestive system to break those enzymes down. Utilize beans properly. They are not for human consumption. And if you know you have to cook them to eat them, they're not for us anyway. Okay. Your cheese you asked about. She's asked what kind of cheese. Raw and salted cheese, period. Now, most of your cheese that you get in the store, they're lying to you. They're not raw. They'll heat them to 137 degrees and call it raw because the FDA won't stop them. So you have to be very careful.
How do you prepare your cheese?
Pardon?
How do you make your cheese?
I don't make it. I buy it from an Amish or Mennonite farmer who knows how to make it. Yes.
The frozen meat, it's very hard for me to find unfrozen meat. And then I can go to a store and buy it, but I found that I like the taste of the Amish one. At the moment, I can only get it frozen.
Okay, yes, about
And I know
frozen meats and fresh meats. What's the difference? Is it better to eat frozen over, Whole Foods meats? Now, Whole Foods meats is malarkey. If they carry a grass-fed from New Zealand or Australia, that would be a good thing when they do carry it. However, Whole Foods is I hate to go against Texas, but it seems like most people out of Texas who are wealthy don't have any brains. And the people who own Whole Foods have the same problem. I called them and asked them, I wanted to know what they fed their all natural beef. And they said, well, they're fed what cows eat. And I said, okay, but what is that? Where do they get their feed? What kind of feed? What form is it in? We don't know that. So I got to the ranchers. So I started asking the head of the whole department of the heads, all the ranches that they buy meats from. They were feeding them, 15% of their diets were stale donuts. And I said, what cow eats stale donuts? Well, the donuts are made from grain, which cows eat. Oh, okay. Makes sense. Sure it does. How many do you find go and make the grains into a flour, then put sugar and salt in it, and then dip it in boiling water? And boiling oil, not boiling water, boiling oil. So, and they were doing it in lard, boiling the donuts in lard, not vegetable juice, vegetable oil, because cows eat vegetable oil. We don't. And that's another thing I forgot to discuss. Vegetable oils, the margarine that is like plastic. The human body is 98.6 and lower. An herbivore has a body temperature 101.6 all the way up to 105. When they have vegetable oils in their body, they stay fluid at body temperature. When we put vegetable oils in our body, it's too cool. They start crystallizing. That's what causes hardening of the arteries in humans. Vegetable oils. And then when you hydrogenate them, you have the same vegetable structure, same cellular structure as plastic. So of course you're going to have hardened, congested lymphatics. Of course you're going to have hardened, congested arteries and hard membranes and muscles throughout the system because you're eating a vegetable oil. We're not vegetarians, we're not herbivores. Okay?
And then what about the frozen?
You look under, if you want to know how to get rid of them, look under lymphatic congestion and We Want to Live, my book.
frozen. You didn't.
Oh, the frozen meat. I prefer, well, if I had the choice between frozen and grazed fat, I'd alternate them. One time I'd eat the frozen, one time I'd eat the grazed, all grazed. I'd rotate it. That were my choice. When I was in Paris between 1993 and 96, 3 months out of the year, I ate what was it, mad cow. It didn't give me any effects. And it was mad cow. I was eating mad cow for 3 years, 3 months out of a year. And I didn't know, my last trip home from Paris, I read in this magazine on the plane that Carrefour supermarkets had been selling the mad cow meat for all that time. And I had eaten it all that time, like I said, it didn't affect me. You know, I think when you eat it raw, your body is very built to handle and discard the toxicity. Also, I didn't eat the brain and nervous system. You know, so I was eating muscle meat. Yes.
I have a question about the salt.
About what?
Salt and
Salt.
soy sauce. Can you talk
Salt.
about
Salt.
Salt.
That's not my question. That's not the 14.
Salt, you guys are keeping me on track. That's something I usually eat with water and salt. Salt is a very bad thing. Second worst thing to cooking your food. If you look at, and I even saw this in high school when they were putting salt, you know, testing salt in a diet of a guinea pig. And they started putting salt in this diet. And you could see that in the blood under an electronic microscope, the sodium would clump into 5, 6, 10 molecules. And normally it's one really finite molecule. When sodium's in food, that sodium molecule is so tiny. But in salt, it's a very large molecule, and they clump together. So usually when you have sodium in food, it's conjoined, really conjoined, like, Siamese twins, with a multitude of nutrients. It's like a smorgasbord. So when a cell opens and the 1 or 2 ions inside the cell attracts the minerals that are passing, and sodium's one of them, it pulls a whole smorgasbord of nutrients with it. Vitamin A, vitamin B's, all of this conglomerate. If you see it under a microscope, it is beautiful. You get these varied colors, different little things like you saw in the pictures, and that's a whole multitude of nutrients, and all of them absorbed in at once. When you have these big, jaggedy molecules of sodium that have come from salt, they're so huge it can't get into the cell, and it rips the molecules. The magnetism is so great that it pulls the ions out of the cell so they can no longer eat. And then they shrivel like a raisin like a grape to a raisin, or a plum to a prune. And they never eat again, they die. So 2 little bitty grains create enough clumping to destroy 2 million red blood cells. Well, 2 million just barely fits on the end of a pinhead, That's not a lot of blood loss, but you put a shake on there, you're ending up with a teaspoon of dead blood for every meal. And is that conducive to every day, every meal that you're having salt? How much destruction of that is your blood? Let's say you lose 3 tablespoons of blood a day. How long does it take your marrow to produce that much blood? It's going to deteriorate your system. So I say no salt is good unless you've got adrenal exhaustion. And like I say in my book, you just use 2 little bit grains a week, and that's all it takes. Yes? You.
Okay. I've just got a question about your global perspective on, and it kind of comes off from what you just said, that maybe it triggers my mind a question, that if you're recommending that people eat grazed, pasture, free range, all that stuff. We have a world population, I'm looking at this from the global, and I'm interested in the global perspective here. If we have a world population that's, burgeoning, and especially countries like China, India, so forth, if everyone was eating free range, pastured, whatever, grazed meats, how can we sustain that?
Easily.
Well, how do you see that?
Well, you have to look at it this way. If you're eating grains and cereals, which is not your normal diet, do you know how much field room that takes? Tremendous amount.
So how much field room does a cow need to be free range? I mean, it's like a couple of
It depends. If it's if it's like in Hawaii, in a area where there's regular rain, they can be on 5 acres and be 100 cattle on 5 acres and never leave the 5 acres. The grass grows so rapidly. When I was in Hawaii, they had 40 cows on 1 acre. The cows couldn't eat the grass fast enough. I mean, the grass was this high, and they never moved out of that whole 3 acres.
But most places aren't Hawaii.
I know, but if we kept those areas to the places where cattle grew, it would be fine. Like in South America, in Central America, Mexico, those areas where there's regular rain, it's fine. However, you see all the fields that we have to grow grains for you humans. We destroy millions and millions of acres to grow and in fields in the topsoil to grow grains to feed people.
Well,
And
what
the
about-
grains don't
what
do
about
well.
feed
Were
to
you
the
here
animals?
earlier? Did you come late?
I came a half an hour late. What
Oh.
about the grains to feed the animals though, to keep them alive?
You don't feed
You don't get
animals
any
grains.
grains, saying.
Well, you can. If they're milking, you give them a few.
Because some of
cups.
these in the wintertime, I mean, I know in this country at least, most animals in the wintertime are kept, you know, in the barns or whatever. There's no fields to graze on.
That's not
So-
natural and it's not a good thing.
So, but I'm just saying that that's what's being done, so how do you?
That's being done. I'm not saying that's
Yeah.
good.
Okay.
I'm not arguing with you about
Yeah,
that. Not at all.
okay.
Any other questions? Yes.
You mentioned about not mixing the egg white and yolk. Just
No, I said, many people say don't mix the egg white and the yolk.
Okay.
I say mix the egg white and the yolk.
Okay, is it okay to blend it with
You
the?
mean by itself?
No, just with the milk.
Yeah, milk
Okay.
is fine. Never blend eggs or whip eggs alone. In 3 strokes, or 2 strokes it was, a scientist proved they destroyed 3 enzymes in the egg white that when they're high in the blood, cancer cannot progress. So don't whip, if you whip your egg twice, you expose it to oxygen like that, from even whipping it twice, an egg twice, you destroy 3 enzymes in the egg white. You oxidize them that quickly, that prevent cancer from progressing, if you can keep those levels high in the blood.
So suck it in.
So suck like the eggs if you have cancer, you know, but suck them like I do, or break them into a glass and down them. Do not whip them. However, if you have it with milk or cream, it coats that so they don't oxidize. Okay, so that's okay. But you don't blend for a half an hour, you blend a few seconds. Okay?
One
Yes.
question, sorry, about the clay you mentioned in your book. Like
Yeah.
you were talking about not taking any mineral supplements, but you mentioned a clay in your book.
Well, I found that the cheese and honey together work better, but you can also use like a Terramin clay if you want to even add more. But when you use a clay as a mineral supplement, that is a mineral that will not be utilized cellularly, but it'll help magnetize those toxins out of those 3 circulatory systems as it passes through the digestive tract. I just enjoy eating cheese and honey together, or cheese rather than eating dirt. This is my preference. Yes, back there. You have a blue shirt.
Do you have a specific procedure for dealing with different types of cancer, or do you already have a one common approach?
As I say in the book, I've got 9 pages on cancer. All of them are affected with a little bit something different. Do you have We Want to Live?
I have not yet.
Okay.
I have a friend.
There's
that-
9 pages on different kinds of cancers and what I suggest for each one.
Okay.
But always eggs, lots of eggs. Yes?
Horses are my passion, and it's what got me started on this whole health journey.
Uh-huh.
About 2 years ago, I stopped vaccinating and stopped worming.
Uh-huh.
And the veterinarians will scare the hell out of you
Oh, yes, they
with the
will.
worms. Is it the same with horses that parasites are good?
Absolutely. Yep.
And I've had the horses in my family on homeopathy to try and avert the vaccine damage. What is your thoughts on homeopathy?
I don't like homeopathy because it's chemicals. There's always a better way to do it. You know, you could get coconut and let the horse chew on it. It'd be much better. The horse is built to digest coconut. We aren't. They are. They can get too much fermentation. They will get too much gas and bloat if they have too much coconut. If it's too fermented, let me put it that way. So always give them more fresh. A cow can eat things so fermented it wouldn't matter. But a horse is a little bit more delicate. I loved horses, so I worked with horses and trainers and exhibitors of horses for their diets for about 6 years. Some great results. And they love avocado. Yes.
Question about the site. I know that it's not yours, but if you find something that works in between your putting out your books, besides the information that's in the books, if something new that you have found, is it on there? Like, there's nothing there on migrants, for instance. Do you put things on there?
I issue a newsletter every 2 months. If my schedule allows, sometimes it runs in about 2.5 months, and then I'll catch up the next time. But it runs about every 2.5 months. I put out a newsletter with at least 5 articles on some information. So that's about, I don't know, $60-some a year, you know. So that's a way you can keep up with anything that I'm letting people know about.
So you can sign up on that same website?
Yeah, on that same
Okay,
website,
okay.
yes. Over here, yes.
Yeah, can you just talk a little bit about your lobbying experience and what any of us could do?
Let me get to that after we do diet, okay? Hold that thought.
Okay.
Yes.
In your book, I was intrigued that you talked about foods by color.
Yeah.
You know, like the red. Could you just mention, or how did you come on that? Is there something, is it in the phytochemicals, you know, that are in those colors?
Well, the way I came upon it was a colleague of mine mentioned it, and because I was autistic, I was able to see a lot of things that other people couldn't see happening in nature, and I would see colors emanating from snakes or things that were injured and things that weren't injured. So I saw a color relationship there, and on different diets, animals would eat different diets, I could see another color emanating from it. So I took his material, put mine together, and I worked with her material off and on for about 11 years, and came up with that formula that seemed to work. How, it works, I can't tell you. I'm an empirical scientist, not a anal retentive. In other words, the health departments, when they argue against raw milk, they will argue not about raw milk. They will argue listeria, salmonella, how it affects the human body, how it's so much poisoning a year, and they don't ever link it to raw milk. And I say, you're arguing all this stuff, but what about raw milk? What did you find? Well, we find salmonella, and when salmonella is found in the body, it can do this. Yeah, but does it happen with raw milk? No, they have not proved that, and it doesn't happen. Because if people were as sick as I do and as maimed as so many people are when they get on this diet, if it were a dangerous substance, they wouldn't get well, they would be sick. And everybody who eats raw dairy gets well, no matter how contaminated it is. Any other questions? Yes?
What about food intolerances? Maybe you've answered this a little bit, but just to ask directly, if someone has trouble with digestion, even digestion of the raw milk, or they have a lot of allergies or food intolerances, and especially it's an issue now with a lot of children that are autistic, that they're tracing it to food intolerances. They can't break down the peptides and all of that, peptide chains, all that stuff. How does this...
Why aren't they?
Well,
vaccines, medications, mostly antibiotics and vaccines.
But for any person who has a food difficulty with digestion, what would you...
They're not having a food difficulty. The body is using the food to break out that toxicity, and they're calling it an allergy to the food. It is not a food allergy. The body's already toxic with something that it's allergic to. The body's just using the raw milk or the raw eggs to help clean it out of the system. If they're eating pasteurized dairy, they could have allergies to pasteurized dairy or any cooked food. But people who have ill reactions to raw food, it's not the raw food that they're having an ill reaction to.
Are allergies then something that someone could be born with or could acquire that cannot be cured, or can a diet like this always cure an allergy, food allergy?
I've never seen one that could not be cured. Yeah, there was, well, let me qualify that. There was one person who has suffered diarrhea for 2.5 years. And she finally stopped the diet. She got better, healthier, and everything. And I've seen her 2 years after she stopped the diet, and she didn't look as well on that cooked food. She didn't have the diarrhea. So she had a problem where she's going to be healthier and have diarrhea every day, and maybe resolve it and maybe not, or be on a cooked food diet, not have diarrhea, and not be so well. So that was the only person that I found who had, let's say, maybe could not cure it on a raw diet, but I don't know.
Does that apply to the sinus allergies too, all the hay fever that's so prevalent?
Just remember, most of those poisons are in the brain. They're dumping out this area in the sinuses. You know, so again, if you're eating pasteurized milk, the body's going to try to get rid of some of that casein and cauterized lactose out the sinuses, dump it out the mucous membranes wherever it can. But if it's not cauterized and it's not damaged, that milk is just going to get rid of old stuff. So it's old stuff that needs to clean out. And you need to endure it. I did it. I had it for 15 years. And then finally it stopped. Yes?
The trouble, this is silly, but with coconuts, to open them and to get the meat out, and then, you know, is there any way, because you're talking about the coconut cream, you're talking about getting the coconut, opening it, not a product that's already, all right.
Yeah, and it tells you how to do it in both books. It's a very laborious process. So what I did, I bought a bunch of machines in Thailand. You know, it can take the shell off the coconut in 3 to 15 seconds. It takes the coconut and it puts it to a grinder and it grates it into grated coconut in 30 seconds, not even 10 seconds. Whole coconut. And then that goes into this huge juicer that's stainless steel and this big. So it's like a huge champion juicer. So we have one set up in Chicago, one set up in Arizona, and one set up in Los Angeles. And they will make it and send it to you if you want, but it's $14 a pint. Or you can do what I did before I got those machines. I put up a 3x5 card at a high school gymnasium that said, need somebody who likes to break things, $8 an hour. I literally got 50 calls from athletes, women and men. And I picked an African-American skinny guy who was hyperactive and good with his hands. If he were an in on a football team, he could handle coconuts. So I hired him, and every 5 to 6 weeks, he came to my house and juiced 10 to 15 coconuts for me. Put the lime juice in, just everything like it says in books. And then they were in my refrigerator, and I could use them for 5 to 6 weeks. So that was an easy way. And it only cost me $55, $60, $65, you know, once every 5 to 6 weeks. Okay?
Did you say lime juice?
Lime juice.
You put lime juice in coconut?
Yeah, now in the old printing that exists now, there's a misprint in there, and it says some phenomenal amount of how it is of lime juice per 7, 8 ounces of a coconut cream. It's only a half a teaspoon of lime juice in that much coconut cream. It's now it's in its 3rd printing, and it's corrected in this last printing. So, but it corrected in yours. I'm going to get somebody to call on board. Yes.
What are your thoughts on the blood type diet?
Absolutely bogus. Yeah. I've had many people with type A's come to me with severe anemia from that diet. And I put them on lots of red meat, and they're over their anemia in a few weeks. So I've had lots of people that come off of the type, your right type of food for your blood, and it doesn't work on a raw diet. It obviously didn't work on their diet either, their cooked routine, because they came to me with the same problems. So I would have to say my experience is that I haven't seen it work on anybody.
You don't think that's why type O's can't drink milk as well as some
I'm a type O, dude. I drink a half a gallon of milk a
That's what I'm
day.
trying
You
to
see me
discover.
sucking. I have a problem?
Yeah, that's great news to
I
hear.
love it. I wouldn't live without. I wouldn't live without dairy. I mean, it's my favorite thing. So yes.
What is your view on raw almond nectar as an alternative sweetener?
Again, like the noni, it's all processed. If it were the agave were fresh and you were juicing it and even fermenting a little bit, it is very helpful. But once they process it and bottle it and package it, the effectiveness is reduced to at the most 20% effectiveness.
So when it says raw on bottle, really,
It's not raw.
it's not raw.
It's not raw. You see aloe vera juice says raw. It's not raw. It's an absurdity. For raw, it would have all the enzymes that would cause fermentation. But they remove it. And they have to do that with a chemical process. If they're not going to use heat, they do it with a chemical process. But they'll call it raw because they didn't use heat. They may have used kerosene and call it raw. But that's not it. And they'll take a substance like gibberellic acid that you get from grapes, and they'll treat something with it, even use it as a pesticide. And it causes grapes to really grow fat and hold a lot of water. and they'll call that gibberellic acid a natural substance. I tell you, when they pull it out of the rice bran to free up that gibberellic acid, it is a complete chemical just like kerosene. So they lie and they lie and they lie, and the FDA backs it because it's big money. Yes?
Did I hear you say there are different milks for different things, like goat's milk or?
Well, goat's milk, yes. If somebody's fat and has diabetes, goat milk is better. If somebody's thin and hyperactive, they better not drink goat's milk. Because there are a lot of adrenal and hormonal precursors in that. Have you ever seen a relaxed goat? Never.
But some people say it's more digestible than the.
Sure, it goes right through you. Doesn't mean it's more digestible. If it were more digestible, people would be getting healthier and calmer. The people who are thin and eating it and not getting calmer, it's not working for them. You know, that's why I keep people, if they're overweight and sluggish and diabetic, goat's milk is perfect for them. If you're anybody else, cow's milk is the best. Way back in the back, yes?
You said that you fluctuate your fat content as kind of as a part of cycle of cleansing. And I'm just curious, how is that better than keeping it steady in the sense that, you know, I understand that the fat collects the toxins, but then how do you unload the toxins when you scale down?
Well, you go on the weight loss program, or you just let nature take its course. Probably
how is
every,
it healthier for you than, you know, because then you have the flush of the toxins coming through somehow.
Pardon?
I guess, you know, when you're growing in fat content, you kind of retain more toxins in the fat, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when
Well,
you
it
scale
will
down,
absorb into it.
right.
Yeah.
And then when you scale down, all those toxins need to go somewhere, and so at that point they need to either come down through your digestive system,
Or out your skin, out your mucus, your tear ducts, your earwax, you know, the saliva, the tongue, your anus, your urine, you know, you can come out the vaginal cavity. And take a look at this too. Women secrete 20% more mucus because of the vaginal cavity than men. And how much longer do women live than men? 20% longer. So I want a vagina. All you women have penis envy, I want a vagina. I know. So you think about it. It's the only thing that I can correlate that 20% difference. You know, it makes sense to me. Of course, women have more fat too, and that has a lot to do with it. Yes.
You were talking about fruit before. How about berries? How do they compare?
How about what?
Fruits.
Berries and fruit,
Berries?
how do they compare?
Well, fruits have high carbohydrates. I said eat one a day for cleaning out the system. It's best to have.
Compared to that?
How's what?
Berries.
Berries.
Berries, it depends upon how they're grown. But mostly berries are low in carbohydrates. They don't have a lot of sugar in them unless they're very hybrid strawberries. So all of your natural smaller strawberries and your raspberries, mulberries, boysenberries, all of those, as long as they're not too ripe, are low in sugar, normally. Blueberries are low in sugar. Blackberries are low in sugar. Raspberries are low in sugar.
Citrus.
Pardon?
What about citrus? The citrus.
Citrus?
No, the oranges.
Oh, yeah, citrus. That depends on how ripe they are. There's a high sugar level. That's usually when they'll start picking them, when it reaches a certain sugar level. If you get the greener, the better. Like in Asia, you don't eat, I mean, they never ate ripe fruit. I mean, the elders never eat, they always take the green stuff that's unripe. The new kids are all sugar hungry, so they're all eating the ripe fruit. And they have all the emotional problems that we have here, and the adults don't, because they don't eat all that sweet fruit. See, anybody else that I haven't called on yet? Yes?
What would be the optimal amount of raw milk to get to purchase each week for?
It all depends on how much you want to drink and how high you want it. I mean, if you like it very fermented and you like a lot of, fermentation.
Well, enough to make all the raw butter that you need and the cream.
That all depends on how much you consume. You know, I buy the whole butter, I buy the cream and the milk all separate. So I don't separate them myself. I get it, We've got a big dairy in California. I don't eat the dairy from California because I prefer an Amish grown the way I want it. So we have in Los Angeles, on the west side, we have a truck pick up the milk every week and drive it all the way out to California every week. So I drink a half a gallon of milk a day minimum. I eat at least 3 tubs of 1 pound butter a week. I drink at least a quart and a half, which is 3 pints of cream a week. So that's what I consume. And probably 1.5, 2 pounds of cheese a week. That's my dairy consumption. So if you can't get, there are plenty of places to order butter and cream. And it might be better to order it than it is to get all the milk and separate it. Because you can always, if you have any milk left over, if you've pulled the cream off of it to have cream or cheese or make butter, you can always turn that, the rest of that product, that milk, into cheese to help pull out. Remember, you're not going to digest it anyway. So even if it's not a complete product, you can use it as a cheese to pull the toxins out of the body. Okay? So you can always use you don't have to discard or waste anything. And the whey is very good to eat.
The places in Pennsylvania, the Amish places, they'll ship it to you overnight.
Yeah.
So you can order raw butter and the unsalted cheeses and stuff from there, and they'll ship it to you overnight.
Yeah, I only get milk here, and then I have the butter and cream shipped to us from an Amish farmer in Pennsylvania, right into Washington, D.C. Yes?
I like my milk several days old in heat. But I'm part of the Yahoo group, and the owner of that group, he was on your diet, but he changed it, modified it, and he's very against dairy. And he cites that dairy is opioids, and that the ratio of calcium to magnesium is so severe that it can cause problems.
Obviously, that guy is anal retentive. I drink 1.5 gallons of milk a day. Many of my patients have recovered from being like Auschwitz victims, from eating a 1/2 gallon of milk a day. Does it look like there's a problem, or is his intellectual bullshit right?
But fermenting it like I do is good.
Yes, that's the way I always ferment. You don't see me eating fresh milk there. That's all fermented. That's the way I like it.
That's what I wanted to ask you a question, to go back to the milk. Because I have a hard time tolerating the regular raw milk. But kefir is no problem.
Yeah.
So should you stick to kefir, or should you just continue trying until your body assimilates the regular raw milk?
Like I say, I won't drink raw milk cold, and I prefer fermented. So 95% of the milk that I consume is kefir. Yeah. I remember I had a digestive, challenge that the doctors gave me. So I ferment just about everything. Even my meat I like a little off. Yes.
You give a recipe for making milk more digestible. Do you have a recipe for making cream, straight cream more digestible?
You just put honey with it.
Just a little honey.
That's it. Yeah. Honey. Some people think lime or lemon or some kind of other fruit with it. Pardon?
Vanilla?
Vanilla extract doesn't help digest the cream. That it will be more digestible, but it's just the opposite. So if you have trouble digesting cream, you eat honey with it. It helps. Yeah. Yes?
I find recently what I do is take the honey with the honeycomb, and I just mix the honeycomb along with the honey with the meat.
That's wonderful. Honeycomb is dissolved by hydrochloric acid, and it's great for the skin. So honeycomb is a woman's delight. Yes?
I just got raw honey from the farmer, and he told me that the Health and Food Administration is saying to him that, to be careful with the wax, and if the bees go away from their nest, he is to get rid of all the honey, and because of the honey problems. What can you tell us about that honey?
Well, I'm not a beekeeper, So anytime the health department tells you anything, ignore it. Because they know nothing. They're told by somebody who's creating some kind of a new contamination. What they want to do, honey, you have to understand, gets rid of a lot of medication. Okay? So if they say, oh, the mites are getting into your hive and destroying it, use this antibiotic. So the antibiotic kills the bees, and then they say, oh, we've got a bee contamination. What's happening to the bees? And it's the antibiotics that they're using to kill the mites. The bee's already got his way of just preventing from mites. He collects the resin from a tree and puts it in there. And mites can't stand the odor, and they'll leave the hive. So they line this hive with all this tree sap, tree fat, and they call that propolis. Yes?
What are your thoughts on eating bread?
Pardon?
What are your thoughts on bread?
As I mentioned earlier, bread is necessary for some people, some kind of cooked starch. But I go into that enough in the book. Okay? All right, we're going to, one more? Okay, we're going to need to end this right away.
Is beef stock good for you? Boiling the bone?
No. Cooking. You know, you're destroying the bone marrow and everything that's in the bone.
Should you eat it raw then, bone marrow?
Yeah, absolutely. I get bone marrow all the time because of my past cancer condition. I used to get the section of a femur, and we'll cut it, or I have the farmer cut it into sections, and I take a knife and I scoop it out. It's like butter. When it's hard, it's like hardened meat fat. But when it's soft, it's like butter. When it's room temperature and soft. Yeah, Ray?
I just want to ask you a quick question. Your take on so many people believe that the food today is so empty, and they push supplements other than just obviously the profit they're looking for. People into nutrition, studying it for years, look at the food over the last 50 years, and they're empty, they're devoid of nutrients. So a big argument that you need to supplement your diet. So many people have a hard time letting go of their supplement or vitamins. Do you have any comment on that? I know you don't need it on your diet.
If you're eating cooked food, you're going to be deficient. But if you think you're going to supplement it with chemicals, they've hoodwinked you. And you're going to take your money, because there's no way that there is any natural vitamin out there that is really natural. You're going to get high on it, of course, just like you get high on cocaine or any kind of toxic substance. Your adrenaline is going to run. That doesn't mean you're getting well.
Even quote the natural ones from Whole Foods.
I went into it earlier. I went into it earlier. It's all processed, heavily processed. These people that say natural, like you say, they're buying all of this food. You have to remember, it takes a huge amount of food to load one bottle of a certain element. Where are they getting that element? Are they growing just from one? No, they're going to go to another company that has a waste product that has that in it. And they've highly processed it. Just because that company takes that product and does very little to it doesn't mean that it's a natural product, that it hasn't been heavily treated and chemically treated. It has. Yes, our soils are depleted, our foods aren't as strong, we aren't going to be as healthy, but when you eat them raw, at least you're getting everything in them, as long as you can digest well. If you can't, suck eggs until you can. Okay, thank you everyone for coming. Now, before for that, and representatives that way standards, he can be seen as
by the district. I know that they're